Yo, YouTube, Rocketman checking in. If you're a returning viewer, you probably noticed the setup's a little scuffed. I don't have my mic. I don't have my regular setup. I'm not in my apartment. So I'm just using my laptop and my backup webcam. So I apologize in advance. This video quality is not going to be the greatest, but I did still want to make a video for week 2 NFL predictions. I didn't make a video for week 1, but I did do a community post, and in week 1 I did go 11-5 in my predictions. So a pretty solid start. And in this video, I'm going to be doing my week 2 predictions. So let's jump into it. The opening game of week 2 is the Thursday night football game, of course. It's the Washington Commanders going into Green Bay to take on the Packers. Both teams won their week 1 openers with relative ease. I'd say both teams took care of business. And honestly, in terms of the Packers, it was very surprising how easily they made it look. I know, of course, the Lions were starting 2 brand new coordinators, so they might not have been 100% in terms of their play calling and execution, but still, Micah Parsons was a game wrecker. The Packers offense moved the ball with ease, and the defense shut down the Lions offense pretty easily. So that was not very surprising because they figured that the Packers now with Micah Parsons will be a pretty good team this year. But in terms of how easily they made the Lions offense get shut down, it was kind of a surprise. As far as the Commanders, they really weren't tested a whole lot against the Russell Wilson led Giants offense. They did come up with a couple stops here and there, though. Deebo Samuel had a solid debut with his new team getting a touchdown, and the rookie running back, Krosky Merritt, Bill, I guess everyone is calling him, had a pretty solid debut as a rookie for the Commanders running back. So we'll see if he ended up getting the starting role going forward. But as far as this game goes, it's in Green Bay. I do think that the Packers have the advantage. I think it's going to be close, but I do think that the Packers are going to come out on top. We move on to the early afternoon Sunday games, starting with the Cowboys playing host to the New York Giants. The Cowboys had a surprisingly close game with the Eagles, but there's some asterisks there. The Eagles had a ton of roster turnover on their defensive side, along with missing their best player in Jalen Carter for the entire game because of the spitting incident, but that's a different topic for a different day. Cowboys offense was able to move the ball decently well on the ground. That's something that they struggled with in previous seasons, so that was at least a good sight for them to see. Um, George Pickens had a couple flashes there, not really too much of a productive day, but it did show some flashes here and there. CD Lamb had a pretty good day as far as production with over 100 yards receiving, but had 4 crucial drops. Probably, you can argue, single-handedly cost the team a chance to win in the final 2 minutes with a couple of those drops. But the Cowboys did keep it close, did end up losing to the Eagles. As far as the Giants, like I was saying a second ago with the Commanders, the Giants just really didn't show a whole lot. Russell Wilson and the offense really couldn't get much of a rhythm going at all, and the defense did an adequate job, but were probably gassed because of the inefficiency of the offense not being able to stay on the field, meaning the defense had to be out on the field constantly. So I do think I give the edge to Dallas here, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants have a bounce back game here and get a win in Dallas. The next game, I get to talk about my favorite team, the Chokers from Baltimore. The Ravens are at home against the Browns. The Browns honestly probably deserve to win against the Bengals. I think they outplayed them. Myles Garrett feasted on the Bengals offensive line, had 2 sacks in a single series, nearly had 3 on back-to-back-to-back plays in that series. The defense stood tall, shut down Jamar Chase for the most part. They really didn't have that good of a day at all. And the Browns offense, while not having any real flashy plays, were efficient enough to move the ball down the field, get themselves in scoring position. And their rookie kicker honestly just cost them the game with his misses and probably cost himself a roster spot. As far as the Ravens, they've done this over and over and over again, and it's the same result every time. They have a great first 3.5 quarters and then just completely cave in on themselves and collapse in the final half of the fourth quarter. They were up 15 with 5 minutes to go and managed to blow it. Lamar had a phenomenal day, no turnovers. Zay Flowers had one of, if not the best game of his career with the 7 receptions for over 100 yards. And Derrick Henry, unfortunately, that game was going to be remembered because of his fumble in the second to last drive, but he had over 160 rushing yards up to that point in the game. So he had a phenomenal day until that moment. Ravens just collapsed on themselves. The defense, the secondary was getting torched in the end of the fourth quarter there against Josh Allen. It's unacceptable that they lost that game. It's completely unacceptable. I do think that the Ravens get a bounce back here, but knowing how this is, being a fan of the team, I would not be at all surprised if the Ravens are going into week 3 0-2. Up next, we have a game that I think honestly is going under the radar as a potential game of the week candidate. It's the Bengals at home against the Jaguars. Now, the Jaguars, I'm not fully sure what to make of them based on week one. Were they that dominant, or were the Panthers that bad, or was it a little both? It was probably a little bit of both. But it was a weird game. There was a long weather delay. The defense took care of business. They did get a pick off of Bryce Young. The offense wasn't the most effective. They really didn't get the receiving game going all that much, but I think that's just week one of the new season. You're going to have that. Travis Hunter, I think, is going to take a few weeks to get acclimated to the new system, but once he does, I think he's going to be a star player. I think that the 1-2 punch with him and Brian Thomas is going to be one of the best 1-2 punches at wide receiver in the league. As far as the Bengals go, they won, but honestly, like I said a few minutes ago, the Browns probably deserve to win that game. Offensive line looks just as bad as it did last season, unfortunately for Burrow. The receiving game really didn't have too much of a chance to get going because Burrow was constantly running for his life. Chase Brown had a decent day, and the defense, for the most part, did their job. Surprisingly, they kept the Browns in check, which I guess isn't really the biggest accomplishment in the world, but it's something. I do think that the Bengals end up winning here, but I do think that Jacksonville's going to put up a fight. Up next, we have a battle between two teams who had very frustrating results in week one for two very different reasons. It's the Lions at home against the Chicago Bears. The Bears on Monday Night Football had a great start to the game. They were in the head of JJ McCarthy. They were constantly putting pressure on him, making him make bad decisions. They got a pick six off of him in the third quarter, and it seemed like they were going to run away to a victory. But in the fourth quarter, JJ McCarthy turned it on. The Vikings started to turn up the heat and the Bears just didn't have a response. So the Vikings ended up getting a comeback win. Very frustrating for the Bears there and Ben Johnson's debut as head coach of the Chicago Bears. As far as the Lions go, Ben Johnson's former team, they just could not get anything going on either side of the ball. The offense was stagnant. The defense couldn't keep the Packers out of scoring range. And obviously, losing both coordinators is no easy task to overcome. I do think the Lions are going to take a few weeks to really kind of get settled in with the new schemes and everything like that. I do think the Lions get a win here, but the Bears coming into Detroit and getting a win wouldn't surprise me. So I'm going to go with the Lions, but would not be surprised if I'm wrong on this one. We move on. The New England Patriots are going into Miami to play against the Dolphins, who I think, for my money, had the worst performance of any team in week one. They were nearly shut out by the Indianapolis Colts. Daniel Jones looked like a superstar, which I don't think anyone had that on their bingo card. Not in week one at least. But the Miami Dolphins just looked horrible. The offense was terrible. Tua was making bad decisions, bad reads, bad throws. It was a mess, and Jalen Waddle got hurt on top of all of it. The defense couldn't get any stops against the Colts offense either. It was just an all around bad performance. The Patriots showed some signs of life against the Raiders. I thought there were some good flashes there from Drake May. He had a couple nice throws. He did have to throw the ball way too much. I think it was 45 or 46 times. That's way too much for a quarterback who's only in his second year to be throwing. But Travion Henderson had a good debut. Not too productive, but had a couple nice runs here and there. I do think that the Patriots will win this game. Up next, the New Orleans Saints are playing host to the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to be completely honest. A bunch of people were saying the Saints were going to be winless this season. I don't think they're going to be winless after week two. I think they pick up a win here. And maybe that's a big upset, but I'm just looking at the injury report for the 49ers, and it is a daunting list. The 49ers, the metaphor won the battle but lost the war. That's an accurate description for week one against the Seahawks. They won that game on a hard fought game, but they came out of it with a bunch of injuries to key guys. They are potentially not going to have Brock Purdy for this game. They've already confirmed lost Kittle for a couple of weeks. They already are dealing with the injury to Brandon Ayuk. And Christian McCaffrey looks 100%, but we know with his injury history, at any moment he could end up getting hurt. And that I guess that's why they bring in Brian Robinson for backup, who had a decent showing against the 49ers or against the Seahawks, excuse me. He had a decent showing when he did get into the game against the Seahawks, but again, Christian McCaffrey's injury history, there's just no telling. The Saints really didn't have that great of a week one, but to be expected. They're on paper one of, if not the worst roster in the league. But again, just looking at the 49ers injury report, I think this is where the Saints pick up at least one win this season. The next game on the list is the New York Jets at home against the Buffalo Bills. And the Bills are, I think, probably the best team in the league right now. The Jets, I'm rooting for Justin Fields. I was really impressed by him in week one, and it's nice to finally see him get a fair shot at a starting position long term. And he definitely took advantage of it in week one against the Steelers. Unfortunately, they just couldn't come away with that final stop that they needed against the Steelers offense. But I do think the Bills will win this game. And again, unfortunately for the Jets, I'm rooting for you, Justin Fields. I'd love to be wrong on this one, but I do think that the Bills are going to end up winning this one. Josh Allen proved in week one and on Sunday Night Football why he won the MVP last season, and I think that there's no reason to bet against him this week. Up next, the Steelers are playing at home against the Seahawks, and in week one, Rodgers had a renaissance performance against his old team, the Jets. This week, it's the DK Metcalf revenge game against his old team and the Seahawks. I think the Steelers do end up winning here. I think that the Steelers match up well against the Seahawks. I don't really have too many notes on this game. The Seahawks had a tight back and forth game with the 49ers last week that they just came out on the wrong end of. The Steelers, of course, had that shootout that no one saw coming against the Jets, and they did end up getting the better of the Jets at the end of it. I do think the Steelers win here. I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as their week one game, though. And the last of the early slate of games sees the Tennessee Titans at home against the LA Rams. And you got to feel for Cam Ward, man. He starts off his NFL debut against the inarguably best young defense in the entire league in the Denver Broncos. And then he's got to turn around the very next week and play against another one of the best young defenses in the league in the LA Rams. And he showed signs of brilliance against the Broncos in week one. He showed some flashes here and there, but just does not have the talent around him at the moment to really contend, but he did show some promise in that first game of his career. And as far as the Rams go, they really didn't do too much on offense. They really didn't have to because the defense stood tall against CJ Stroud and the Texans by holding him out of the end zone. But I think Stafford's still dealing with a little bit of a back injury, but should he be able to get a little healthier going into week two, we'll see if the offense is able to be a little more productive. I do think that the Rams will win, though. And the late afternoon games start off at 4:05 with the Arizona Cardinals at home against Carolina Panthers. I'm going to say it right off the bat. I think the Cardinals win this game. Panthers, I thought, had a miserable first game. Bryce Young was shell shocked, made just terrible reads. The defense kind of struggled a little bit, but the offense just had nothing going. As far as the Cardinals go, they won in New Orleans, which wasn't the most impressive game ever, but they didn't really need to be too impressive. Trey McBride was a pretty good bright spot of the offense. Marvin Harrison did get a touchdown in the opening game of his sophomore campaign, so we'll see if that means he starts off the season with more momentum than he had at the start of his rookie campaign. But I am taking the Cardinals to win this game. Next is the equestrian matchup between the Denver Broncos and the Indianapolis Colts from Indianapolis. Unfortunately for Colts fans, I think that the performance they got from Daniel Jones in week one was more of an outlier as opposed to the norm for the rest of the season. I think that the Denver Broncos defense is going to be able to keep the Colts offense in check. They're going to be able to get pressure on Daniel Jones, keep Jonathan Taylor from getting any sort of big rushes, and the Denver Broncos offense is going to be able to do enough to get the win. So, unfortunately for Colts fans, I think that week one was more of a just showing out against one of, if not the worst team in the entire league against the Miami Dolphins, as opposed to something to expect going forward. The final matchup of the afternoon is probably on paper the best matchup. It's a rematch of last year's Super Bowl between the Eagles and the Chiefs from Kansas City. Both teams are coming off of about a week and a half of rest. The Eagles obviously haven't played the opening night on Thursday night against the Cowboys in week one, whereas the Chiefs played a day later from Sao Paulo against the Chargers. And the Chiefs looked uncharacteristically out of sync in that game. Just it felt like something was off the entire night. Of course, Mahomes was doing Mahomes things, but Xavier Worthy got hurt in cartoonish fashion, and the entire team just felt like it was out of sorts from there on. The Eagles, if they have Jalen Carter, he's going to be the biggest X factor, but this game being in Kansas City, it's just hard to imagine the Chiefs starting off 0-2. So, despite the logic pointing to the Eagles winning this game, I am going to go with the Chiefs. Sunday Night Football, it's the Vikings at home against the Falcons. Which version of JJ McCarthy are we getting? Are we getting the one that played in the first three quarters where he threw a pick six and looked shell shocked, or are we going to get the fourth quarter JJ McCarthy that just completely took over the game? That's the big question for this game. The Falcons had a chance at sending the game to overtime against the Buccaneers at the end of regulation, but missed the game tying field goal. They had a chance at winning that game a few different points, but just couldn't pull it together and get the win. So I don't really know what to make of this game. This is the one that I've probably mulled on the most of any of these matchups. The one that I've thought about the most in terms of which team I think is going to win. I think I'm leaning Vikings, but I don't really have any strong basis for that. We get a doubleheader on Monday Night Football in week two. The first of the two games, the earlier of the two games, being the Buccaneers going into Houston to play against the Texans. The Buccaneers had a gutsy road win in week one in Atlanta, and Emeka Egbuka had a phenomenal debut. He got the game winning touchdown pass from Baker Mayfield with under a minute left in regulation before Atlanta missed the game tying field goal. As far as the Texans go, the offense was really stagnant against the Rams, couldn't really get anything going. I know Joe Mixon's hurt, but Nick Chubb really was not effective in that starting role at running back. So we'll see this week if the Texans manage to get their offense going a little bit. I do think the Buccaneers win this game, and that feels weird because that means that the Texans would be starting the season 0-2. But that's what I predict. I predict the Buccaneers will win this game. In the final game of week two, the second half of the doubleheader on Monday Night Football sees the LA Chargers going into Las Vegas to play against the Raiders. Chargers had a surprise win against the Chiefs in Sao Paulo in that game, and the Raiders got a win in New England. Both teams looked good in those victories. Brock Bowers is looking like he's dealing with an injury right now, though, for the Raiders, so that's a point of concern. The Chargers looked really good on offense. Justin Herbert was slinging it left and right. He was really great with his decision making. Both defenses stepped up for both teams. I think that this game's going to be a defensive battle, a little bit closer than most people are thinking, but I do think that the Chargers are going to win this game. There you have it. That's my full week two NFL predictions. Let me know in the comments where you agree, where you disagree. Apologize once again for the substandard audio and visual quality. Hopefully, you understand without my main setup. It's a little more scuffed than it otherwise would be. But for future episodes, I'll have my dedicated mic instead of using the mic through the webcam. I'll also have my higher quality webcam and whatnot. I'll be able to do graphics on the future episodes and whatnot. So hopefully, you understand. Again, apologize once again for the scuffed quality on this one. But if you enjoyed it, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff. Follow me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/rocketman0127. Also join the channel Discord. Links to both of those will be in the description. And finally, whenever you're buying anything at poggers.shop, be sure to use code Rocketman at checkout to get 10% off your order. Again, that's code RCKTMAN at checkout to get 10% off your order. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.